Did they catch you out in the sun again? And see that sparkle in your eyes? And did they witness your success again? And make them start to cry? And you dance to cry and believe in the night. Live by your own bad influence. Sing along, don't get it wrong. You might be caught by surprise.
Hey guys, welcome to Surfin' Show. I'm Noel Salas, and today's surfboard review is the Habanero by Tim Stamps. Tim, we're stoked to be here. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, so we're in Westminster, California at Stamps headquarters in Tim's shaping room, and I thought it'd be cool if Tim and I could maybe talk about this Habanero couple boards that he shaped for me, and maybe just kind of get your take on what you made this board for and who you made it for, because it's kind of got a cool little story about it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the Habanero?
Well, this board started off of my Grinder X, which is a pretty popular board I've made the last few years. But the first one I made was for Brett for a contest in Japan. Second one, which kind of put it on the map, was Courtney for the US Open, where they were looking for a groveler board, but also something when it presented itself would turn sharp and fast. So this is a groveler, but I like to call it kind of like an active groveler. Mm-hmm. So it's not like you just stand there and go. It's like it has the surface area, but it still has curve.
Sure.
So you kind of have to like keep it going, but it's going to have more natural speed and glide.
Right. Okay, so when I was riding it, I noticed that it paddled well. And talking to you on the phone, when I engaged you and asked you to maybe shape a couple boards for the show because we've been getting requests for your boards, I remember the conversation was, Tim, you shape me something that'll go good in 1 to 3 foot surf, and then something that'll go good in overhead. And then we kind of mentioned this board to me. At this point, I didn't know it had a name. But for me, it kind of started checking all the boxes for me. We started in overhead surf. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about rocker and concaves and that kind of stuff?
Well, this board, compared to, say, Courtney's like World Tour boards, has a lower rocker than that, but say compared to like your average daily groveler, it probably has a little bit more, I would say, in the tail and the nose. Okay. And that's that part I was talking about, keeping it a little bit freer. But I mean, it still has a super moderate rocker. Concaves are kind of what I generally do. The nose is very, very, very subtle single, and do I'd say a low to moderate single here with some double inset. And this board here has a little flick off a V off the tail. That's the part that keeps it moving. Sure. Because you want to be grovelly, but then when the waves jump out or shelf out, like they do in Huntington or Japan or anywhere in the world, it's still going to fit in there quick.
Right. Now, this has continuous curve throughout?
I would say it has continuous curve.
Okay. So one of the things that I personally liked about the board is with us starting and the waves were overhead, the board felt solid off the bottom and in the pocket, so it had good traction. The board never felt like it was going to slide out. And when I ride a small wave performance board, I'm thinking this board was geared more for 1 to 4 feet because I didn't know it had continuous curve because there wasn't anything on the website for me to learn about at first. Yeah. You just kind of made a board according to what you've done for Courtney and Brett, and you thought this would go good for our community. And for me, in that overhead surf, it was solid. And in the 1 to 2 foot surf, it really caught me by surprise, especially as a quad. And I'll talk about that as we move on, but overall was very pleased with the performance of this board in both the small groveler fitting that description all the way into the overhead surf. So we've talked a little bit about rocker and concave. Why don't you tell us a little bit about outline and the rail?
Okay. Well, this board, as I mentioned, with the rocker line and so forth, was spawned off my Grinder X series of board. And I made a board similar to that for Courtney back at Snapper a couple years back when the waves were pretty terrible. But I revisited that one, and what I did basically was refine the nose a little bit, like where I upped the rocker, I kind of narrowed the nose a little bit, And then also back here up the squash, which this obviously isn't squash.
Right.
I did like a straight cut swallowtail just so it has good release, and then kind of just straighten that line a little bit right off the back just to make that back exit super clean.
Right.
Keep the nose a little bit more forgiving, being a little bit narrower.
Sure.
So
there's something to pivot off of here, right? Almost like in front of the fins, and then it gets, like you said, really straight from here to here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have that slight hip,
right?
And instead of having it round out, I kind of straighten that a little bit, because your foot, like you're going to mention, is supposed to be right about here.
Right, right.
So you have these kind of straight lines for quick release, like when you want like a fast, quick turn right there.
Awesome. And then tell us a little bit about the rails.
It has kind of my typical rail. It's not too thick or not too thin for the thickness of the board.
Right.
I'd call it like moderate as far as proportions go. Soft. Obviously some edge right here up to, good little handprint right in front of there, and then just soft all the way through. Obviously hard off the tail.
Right. So like for me with this model for me, it groveled well. I felt like it had a generous sweet spot under the front foot. So there wasn't a lot of adjusting too much for me. So for me, I recommend this board for intermediate all the way to pro levels, obviously with, Brett and Courtney riding it, but very user-friendly board for our community for sure.
Yeah, it's not like overly grovelly, it's not overly high performance. And one thing I try and put into all my boards, which I'm sure most people do, is just make them predictable and easy to ride. Like some boards, like you kind of just let there kind of segmenty. Like if you stand here, they stop. You stand there, they go. You got to do that. Well, I try and just keep everything to where you don't really have to think about surfing. You just like surf.
Right.
Which
that should be the basics,
yeah,
right?
Right. Is that what we're after?
And that's how it felt under my foot. Just really easy to ride and had a good time. Now, Tim, for the majority time collecting footage on both boards, I spent the majority of my time on the stringless EPS. I was really wanting to test out your construction here. And for our viewers at home, anytime you see me wearing the bright yellow or bright green wetsuit, I'm riding the board as a quad and it's the PU, and everything else is on this board as a thruster. So why don't you tell us a little bit about this construction and your concept on how you're doing carbon layup?
I call it the Cyber. It has stringerless blank to start with. We have the carbon laying up like this in sort of like a Y wishbone pattern, which to me, when we glass it all up and tie it all in, it puts a nice stiff spot here under your front foot. And then as it comes back in here more, you still get that twist off the tail when you're pushing really hard. So the carbon is kind of frees this area to have torsion. And then the nose with nothing up here other than a little carbon on the deck is still damp for flexing, coming in and out of turns and late drops or whatever.
Sure, sure. So one of the things that I noticed was when my foot was in the sweet spot right here, you don't know that it's in the sweet spot for the most part from the bottom, but from the top, I can even see it when I'm surfing down the line and the board's planing. I can kind of visualize and see where my foot is right in between the Y here. And what's interesting is, if people are paying attention in the review, I don't have the blue pad on the whole time, right? Because what was happening to me is I was transitioning from a 5'9" high performance shortboard to this board at being 5'6", so that 3 inches in length. It takes a little bit of time for me to get my feet set for the sweet spot on a 5'6".
Oh, yeah, for sure.
3 inches, right? And putting the traction pad where it goes against right up on the leash plug is where I first put the first one. And one of the things that I'm starting to realize is the traction pads of today with the big stomp pads, they're like 2 inches. Some of them are 2 1/4 in not thickness, but in the length. So when it comes off 2.5 inches from where you put it, it's moving my foot probably an inch to an inch and a half up further than the leash plug than where I want it to be. And what was happening was I was noticing that if my foot was too far up in front of that Y, I was getting a bog. So I'm thinking, whoa, that's weird. And I'm sure Tim's worked that out. So I ripped the pad off and I customized this pad and scooted it back to that 1.5 inches. And the board and I started to like really connect. So for me, I had a blast on both boards. I was really stoked at how this board worked in that overhead surf. There was a little bit of texture on some of the waves, and the board was settling in off the bottom, and it felt great, and I didn't notice a ton of chatter either. So diving into fins, Tim, for the majority of the review, I was riding the EPS, and I was riding the new Beta 2.0. This is the R8 full carbon layup fin. And this is the large raked fin, and I couldn't believe how good these fins felt in that particular board, especially even in the bigger surf. I don't know why you say that. Like, I'm surprised. You know, it comes in at like a 5 on the ride number, but they're so light. You know, I'm waiting for it not to give me the performance I'm looking for, so I thought bigger waves, EPS, that would have a problem. But have you had a chance to try these?
Yeah, I wrote a set of the prototypes in this, the R Series R6, down in Mexico in some point surf, wide variety of conditions, and a few different fin sets, and these things are the ones that end up staying in my board for the last couple of days of the trip. It felt lively and responsive compared to the other fins, and they surpassed my go-to fin, which was the John normally for a thruster setup.
Right.
Which used to be my favorite.
Yeah, that's epic. So were you riding a PU construction or were you riding EPS? What were you riding?
I was riding PU with Team Light glassing.
Okay.
And no carbon in the tail or anything. Just I like some twist.
Sure. So were you any negative feedback on these fins yet, or?
Nothing I had except I had to go home from the trip. Come back to here, but whatever.
Now, what size waves were you pushing on these fins?
I would say from shoulder high to 3 or 4 feet overhead.
Wow. And then how tall are you and how much do you weigh?
I'm about 5'9" and change and about 175.
Okay, and you're riding the medium fins. Epic. Okay, so for me, I rode the stretch quad set. This is a medium in the PU, and it's classic how we shot on your boards for 3 days. So we had great waves. Waves are super fun. I got on that board for 2 days, and what we like to do is usually have about 2 minutes worth of footage so we can really see a board and some good waves. But we had your boards in the queue waiting to do the review for almost 3 months.
Yeah, I didn't sleep very good.
So when I got on the PU, I thought, well, I'll be on this board for a couple days, so I'll start with a quad. And it was smaller. It was like maybe that 1 to 3 head-high surf. And I couldn't believe how good the board went as a quad. Sometimes it's one, I like one more over the other. I have no real preference whether I like thruster or quad better. And for me on the footage, this PU had that pop and twang with the speed generating fin. So I was like, man, this board feels like it's coming in. I haven't weighed it yet. We'll get to it, but it felt a little bit heavier like most PUs do over an EPS.
Yeah.
And I felt like the board was performing with the speed generating fin like an EPS board in small waves. So thoroughly impressed with the PU and EPS, and I liked it both as thruster and quad.
That's good. I ride a lot of quads, so maybe that has something to do with it too.
There you go. Now, have you ridden the Habanero yourself? Have you shaped yourself one?
I don't have one yet.
You might need to do one now.
It's on the list.
All right, sick.
Need to get them. Like, other people take priority over myself these
That's
days.
right. That's right. So let's look at some waves together. Nice, quick vertical turn. Wave goes flat. These are the stretch speed generating fins. Watch the pop in my turns. With the PU, good combination. I like this little right here. Quick, tail gets free for a second. Now this is a thruster. This is the Beta 2.0 prototype fin. Nice projection right there and a quick, tight little wrap. Now this little left, I really like. This is the HS1 quad set. Another speed generating fin, and I just really felt like it was a good combination. Quick turn right there. Nice little hit. You see it's got that pop or flare that I would expect out of an EPS. Now that's last little right here. Watch the board get going. Wave starts to pick up. Good projection and a solid finish. So these waves are a little bit overhead. I like the combination. Board had great flow. Look at the projection off that turn right there. This is a good size wave. Nice spray. Good projection over that section right there. And again, like I said, a lot of confidence with this board. And the tail felt good getting free too. I still felt like I had good control. Watch the bottom turn, foam climb, and projection all at the same time. And I really felt that was a good connection for me with this board. Wave goes flat on that turn. But look at the pop. That's that EPS I like. Here's a nice overhead wave. Nice bottom turn right in the hook. This is a good roundhouse. Put the board on rail. Like I said, it has that traction I'm looking for. A little off right there, but watch the board start to go. Projecting, getting me where I want to be to finish well. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's review on the Habanero. Tim, thanks for having us. talking about the boards, breaking it down for us, and submitting the boards for review.
Thanks for allowing me to. It's an honor.
Yeah, so I'm super stoked. Guys, 2019, this is a favorite, and if it's not on your radar, it should be. I'm calling it a one-board quiver for you guys out there that don't want to buy 3. It'll gravel well, it'll perform well, and I really felt like it held its own in a little overhead surf. Well, that's it for today. If you like the show, subscribe. You can also find us at surfandshow.com. Until next time, we'll see you in the water. Bye-bye.
And you just might find you got a bad influence. And did you push them to the edge again? Another perfect incident. And did they clearly miss the point again? Could you spot the difference? And you dance the cry and believe in the night. Live by your own bad influence. You sing along, don't get it wrong. You might be caught by surprise. And you just might find you got a bad influence. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on.